Acts chapter 21. And it came to pass, when we set sail, having torn ourselves away from them, having run a straight course, we came to Kos, and the next day to Rhodes, and from there to Patara. And having found a boat crossing over to Phoenicia, having gone on board, we set sail. And having sighted Cyprus, and having left it on the left hand, we sailed to Syria, and disembarked at Tyre. For there the boat was unloading its cargo. And after a search, having found the disciples, we remained there 7 days, who were such that they kept on saying to Paul, through the intermediate agency of the Spirit, that he should not be setting foot in Jerusalem. And it came to pass that when we had fulfilled the days, having gone off, we were going on our way, all of them with wives and children accompanying us until we were out of the city. And having kneeled upon our knees on the beach, having prayed, and having said goodbye to one another, we went on board the boat, and those returned home again. Now as for us, when we had finished the voyage from Tyre, we arrived at Ptolemais, and having greeted the brethren, we remained 1 day with them. And on the next day, having gone off, we came to Caesarea, and having entered the home of Philip the evangelist, the bringer of good news, he being one of the 7 deacons, we remained with him as his guests. This man had 4 daughters, virgins, exercising the gift of prophecy. Now while we were remaining there many days, a certain man came down from Judea, a prophet named Agabus. And having come to us, and having taken the belt belonging to Paul, having bound his own feet and hands, he said, Thus says the Holy Spirit, the man who owns this belt, the Jews shall bind in the same manner and deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles. And when we heard these things, as for us, both we and those of that place kept on begging him not to be setting foot in Jerusalem. Then Paul answered, What are you doing, weeping audibly and breaking my heart? For as for myself, I am holding myself in readiness on behalf of the name of the Lord Jesus, not only to be bound, but also to die in Jerusalem. And he, not being persuaded, we lapsed into silence, having said, The will of the Lord, let it be done. And after these days, having packed our luggage, we went on our way up to Jerusalem. And there went also with us certain ones of the disciples from Caesarea, conducting us to a certain Mnason, whose guests we were to be, a disciple of long standing. And when we came to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. Now on the next day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. And having greeted them, he took them through the story of the things God did among the Gentiles through his ministry, rehearsing them one by one. And having heard these things, they glorified God and said to him, You see clearly, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed, and all are zealous for the law. Now they have been carefully instructed with reference to yourself, that you are teaching all the Jews who live among the Gentiles to apostatize from Moses, saying that they are not to be circumcising their children, neither to order their manner of life after their customs. What is it therefore? They will certainly hear that you have come and are here. This therefore do at once, that which we tell you. There are with us 4 men who have a vow on them. Having taken these to yourself as associates, ceremonially purify yourself in association with them, and pay their expenses incurred in taking this vow, in order that they may shave their head. And all will know that the things in which they were instructed concerning you are nothing, but that you yourself also are ordering your behavior according to rule, keeping the law. Now as concerning the Gentiles who have believed, as for us, we wrote, having come to the conclusion that they are to be keeping themselves both from animal flesh, which had been sacrificed to idols, and from blood, and from flesh of animals which had been killed in such a way that the blood had not been drained out, and from fornication. Then Paul, having taken the men to himself the next day, having purified himself ceremonially together with them, went on into the temple, declaring the fulfillment of the days of the purification, until the sacrifice was offered for each one of them. Now when the 7 days were about to draw to a close, the Jews from Asia, having seen him in the temple, kept on throwing the entire crowd into confusion, and they laid their hands on him, crying out, Men, Israelites, be bringing aid. This is the man who is teaching all men everywhere against the people and the law and this place, and moreover also brought Greeks into the temple and has profaned this holy place. For they had before seen Trophimus, the Ephesian, in the city with him, whom they supposed Paul brought into the temple. And the entire city was thrown into a commotion, and there occurred a running together of the people, and having seized Paul, they were dragging him by the heels outside of the temple. And immediately the doors were closed. And as they were seeking to kill him, a report went up to the chiliarch, who commanded the cohort, that all Jerusalem was in confusion, who immediately, having taken soldiers and centurions, ran down to them. And having seen the chiliarch and the soldiers, they ceased beating Paul. Then the chiliarch, having come near, seized him and ordered that he be bound with 2 chains. And he went to inquiring who he might be and what he had done. And some in the crowd were shouting one thing and others something else. And when he was not able to come to know the particular thing that could be relied upon as the truth because of the confusion, he commanded that he, Paul, be brought into the barracks. And when he came upon the stairs, things came to such a pass that he was being carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the people, for the great mass of people was following, crying out, "Be doing away with him." And as Paul was about to be brought into the barracks, he says to the chiliarch, "Will you permit me to say something to you?" And he said, "Do you know Greek? As for you, you are not then the Egyptian, that one who before these days stirred up to sedition and led out into the uninhabited region 4,000 men of the assassins?" But Paul said, "As for myself, I am indeed a man, a Jew of Tarsus, a city of Cilicia, a citizen of no undistinguished city. And I beg of you, permit me to speak to my people." And after he had given him permission, Paul, having taken his stand on the stairs, beckoned with his hand to the people. And a sustained silence having come, he addressed them in the Hebrew dialect, saying, "Men, brethren, and fathers, hear my defense which I am making to you just now." And having heard that in the Hebrew dialect he was addressing them, they provided him all the more with silence. And he said, "As for myself, I am a man who is a Jew, having been born in Tarsus of Cilicia, having been brought up with reference to my education in this city, at the feet of Gamaliel, having been instructed in accordance with the strictness of the law received from the fathers, being zealous for God, even as all of you are this day. I, who persecuted this way to the extent of death, binding and delivering to prison both men and women, as also the chief priest bears me witness, also the eldership of the Sanhedrin, from whom, having also received letters to the brethren, was journeying to Damascus for the purpose of bringing those who were there in chains to Jerusalem, in order that they might be punished. And it came to pass that as I was proceeding on my journey and nearing Damascus, about noon, suddenly out from heaven there flashed around me like lightning a great light, and I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And as for myself, I answered, "Who are you, sir?" And he said to me, "As for myself, I am Jehoshua, the one from Nazareth whom you are persecuting." And those with me saw indeed the light, but did not hear the voice of the one speaking to me, so as to understand the words, but heard it merely as a sound. And I said, "What shall I do, Lord?" And the Lord said to me, "Having arisen, be going on your way into Damascus, and there it shall be told you concerning all things which have been appointed for you to do." And when the ability of looking upon surrounding objects was taken away from me because of that light, and I was not seeing, being led by the hand of those with me, I came into Damascus. And a certain Ananias, a pious man, who reverenced God according to the law, being well recommended by all the Jews who resided there, having come to me and standing over me, said to me, "Saul, brother, look up at once and recover your sight." And as for myself, I looked up to him that very hour and recovered my sight. And he said, "The God of our fathers chose and appointed you to come to know experientially his will, and to see with discernment the one who is righteous, and to hear the voice of his mouth, because you shall be one who bears testimony for him to all men concerning the things you have seen and heard. And now, why are you delaying? Having arisen, be baptized, and wash away your sins, having previously called upon his name." And it came to pass that after I returned to Jerusalem, and while I was praying in the temple, I entered into a new experience, that of having my mind drawn off from surrounding objects and wholly fixed on things divine. And I saw him while he was saying to me, "Hurry, and at once get out of Jerusalem quickly, because they will not accept your testimony concerning me." And as for myself, I said, "Lord, they themselves know that I was continually imprisoning and beating in every synagogue those who put their trust in you. And when the blood of Stephen, your witness, was shed, the witness who bore testimony to you by his death, I myself also was standing by and exulting, and was guarding the clothes of those who were putting him out of the way. And he said to me, "Be going on your way, because as for myself, to Gentiles afar off I will send you forth on a mission." And they kept on listening to him up to this word, and they raised their voice, saying, "Be taking away from the earth such a person, for it was not fitting that he should live." And when they were crying out and throwing off their garments and throwing dust into the air, the Chiliarch commanded that he should be brought into the barracks of the soldiers, having said that he should be given a judicial examination under the duress of the torture inflicted by scourging, in order that he might come to fully know the cause on account of which they were continually shouting so against him. And when they had stretched him out for the lashes, Paul said to the centurion standing by, "A man who is a Roman and uncondemned, is it legal for you to be scourging?" And the centurion, having heard this, having gone to the Chiliarch, brought this report, saying, "What are you about to be doing? For this man is a Roman." And having come, the Chiliarch said to him, "Be telling me, as for you, a Roman are you?" And he said, "Yes." And the Chiliarch answered, "As for myself, with a great sum of money I procured this citizenship." But Paul said, "And as for myself, I am a Roman by heredity." Then immediately they stood off from him, those who were about to be examining him. And the Chiliarch became afraid, having come to know that he was a Roman, and because he had put him in chains. Now on the next day, desiring after mature consideration to come to know what the particular thing was of which he was being accused by the Jews, he unshackled him, and commanded the chief priests and the entire Sanhedrin to assemble. And having brought Paul down, he stood him before them. And Paul, having riveted his gaze upon the Sanhedrin, said, "Men, brethren, as for myself, I have conducted myself as a citizen of God's commonwealth of Israel, in all good conscience toward God up to this day." And the chief priest Ananias ordered those standing by to be striking him upon the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "To be striking you, God is about to be doing, you wall that has been plastered over and whitewashed with lime, hypocrite that you are, who conceals your malice under an outward assumption of piety. And as for you, being what you are you sitting as a judge to be pronouncing judgment upon me according to the law, and contrary to the law you are commanding me to be beaten?" And those standing by said, "The chief priest of God, are you heaping abuse on him?" And Paul said, "I did not know, brethren, that he was a chief priest. For it has been written, and is at present on record, concerning the ruler of your people you shall not speak evil." Now Paul, having come to see that the one part were Sadducees and the other part Pharisees, cried out in the Sanhedrin, "Men, brethren, as for myself, a Pharisee I am, a son of Pharisees. Concerning a hope even of a resurrection of dead people I am being judged." As he was saying this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the crowd was split in two. For Sadducees say there is not a resurrection, neither angel nor spirit, but Pharisees profess the both. And there arose a great clamor, and certain of the men learned in the sacred scriptures, who were attached to the Pharisees, having arisen, went to fighting it out, saying, "We do not find one bit of evil in this man. And what if a spirit spoke to him, or an angel?" And a great dissension arising, the Chiliarch, having become afraid lest Paul should be torn in pieces by them, commanded the soldiers, having gone down, to take him by force from their midst, and to be bringing him into their barracks. And on the next night, the Lord, having taken his stand by Paul, said, "Be having a cheerful courage, for as you testified with reference to the things concerning me in Jerusalem, thus as for you, it is a necessity in the nature of the case also to testify in Rome." And when day dawned, the Jews, having entered into a conspiracy, invoked God's curse upon themselves, if they should violate their vow, saying that they would neither eat nor drink until that time which they would kill Paul. And there were more than 40 who entered this conspiracy. They, having come to the chief priests and the elders, said, "We invoked God's curse upon ourselves. Should we violate our vow, declaring ourselves anathema, should we do so, vowing to eat not even one thing until such time as we killed this Paul. Now therefore, as for all of you, together with the Sanhedrin, suggest at once to the Chiliarch that he bring him down to you, as though you were about to be judging the things concerning him more accurately. And as for us, before he comes near, we are those who are in readiness to put him out of the way." Now the son of Paul's sister, having heard of their ambush, having come and having entered the barracks, reported this to Paul. Then Paul, having called one of the centurions to him, said, "Be taking this young man away to the Chiliarch, for he has something to report to him." Then, having taken him, he brought him to the Chiliarch, and said, "The prisoner Paul, having called me to himself, asked that I bring this man to you, who has something to say to you." Then the Chiliarch, having taken him by his hand, and having withdrawn, went to inquiring of him privately, "What is it that you have to report to me?" And he said, "The Jews agreed among themselves to ask you to bring Paul down to the Sanhedrin tomorrow, as though about to be inquiring more accurately concerning him. As for you, therefore, do not permit yourself to be persuaded by them, for there lie in ambush for him more than 40 of their men, those who are of such that they invoked God's curse upon themselves, should they break their vow not to eat nor drink until the time as they have destroyed him. And now they are in readiness, looking for the promise from you." So then the Chiliarch dismissed the young man, having charged him to tell not even one person these things which he had made plain to him. And having called to himself a certain 2 of the centurions, he said, "Make ready at once 200 heavily armed foot soldiers, in order that they may proceed to Caesarea, and 70 soldiers of the cavalry unit, and 200 lightly armed soldiers about 9 o'clock at night, and furnish them beasts of burden, in order that, having mounted Paul upon one, they might bring him safely through to Felix the governor." And he wrote a letter having this form: "Claudius Lysias, to his excellency, the governor Felix, greeting. This man, having been seized by the Jews and about to be put out of the way by them, having rushed in the nick of time with my heavily armed legionaries, I rescued, having learned that he was a Roman. And desiring to come to know fully the cause on account of which they were bringing a charge against him, I brought him down to the Sanhedrin, their council, whom I found to be accused concerning questions of their law, but having not even one thing worthy of death or bonds laid to his charge. And when it was pointed out to me that there would be a plot against this man, immediately I sent him to you, having given orders also to his accusers to be telling before you what they have against him. So then the soldiers, according to the order given them, having taken up Paul, brought him through a night of travel 40 miles to Antipatris. And on the next day, having left the horsemen to be going with him, they returned to their barracks, and they, having gone on to Caesarea, and having delivered the letter to the governor, presented also Paul to him. And having read the letter, he also asked as to what kind of a province, senatorial or imperial, he came from. And having ascertained that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will hear fully and adjudicate your case whenever also your accusers have come," having previously ordered that he be put under guard in the palace of Herod. Now after 5 days, the chief priest with certain elders and a certain prosecuting attorney, Tertullus, came down, who were such that they preferred charges before the governor against Paul. And after he, Paul, was called, Tertullus began to be accusing him, saying, "In view of the fact that we are obtaining much peace through you, and evils are constantly being corrected and things set right for our nation through your forethought in all ways and in all places, we accept these, most illustrious Felix, with all gratefulness. But in order that I may not further cut in on your time and detain you from your beneficent reforms, I beg of you to hear us in your sweet reasonableness, and we will be concise. For we found this man to be a pest and a plague and an instigator of insurrections among all the Jews throughout the Roman Empire, and a front-ranked champion of the heretical sect of the Nazarenes, who also attempted to profane the temple, whom also we seized, whom you will be able, having yourself conducted an investigation concerning all these things, to come to know fully the things of which, as for us, we are accusing him. And the Jews also joined in the charge, affirming that these things were so. And Paul answered, the governor having nodded to him to be speaking, "Knowing that for many years you have been a judge of this nation, I confidently present my defense with respect to the things concerning myself, you being able to understand that there are not more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship. And neither in the temple did they find me disputing with any certain individual, nor stirring up a crowd, nor even in the synagogues, nor in the city. Neither are they able to substantiate before you the charges concerning which they now are accusing me. But I confess this to you, that in accordance with the way, which system of belief they call heresy, thus am I serving the God of my fathers, believing all things which stand written according to the law, and those things in the prophets, having hope toward God, which hope they themselves also look for, that there shall be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. And in this also I myself am constantly disciplining myself to be having a conscience which does not cause offense to God and to men at all times. Now after an interval of some years I came, having brought alms to my nation and sacrificial offerings, in the presenting of which offerings they found me ceremonially purified in the temple, not with a crowd, nor with an uproar. But certain Jews from Asia, who ought to have been present before you, and to be bringing accusation if they were having anything against me, or let these themselves tell what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the Sanhedrin, except concerning this one voice, which, while standing among them, I cried aloud, Concerning a resurrection of dead people, I am being judged today by you. Then Felix put them off by deferring the hearing and the deciding of the case, knowing more accurately the things concerning the way, having said, When Lysias, the chiliarch, comes down, I will determine the things which pertain to you. He gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept under guard, and that he should relax the severe conditions of imprisonment and make things easier for him, and that he should not forbid any of his own people to be ministering to him. Now, after certain days, Felix, having come back with Drusilla, his own wife, who was a Jewess, sent for Paul and heard him concerning his faith in Christ Jesus. And while he was discoursing concerning righteousness and self-control and the judgment which was about to come, Felix, having become terrified, answered, Be proceeding on your way for the present, and having found an opportune time, I will summon you. At the same time, also hoping that money will be given to him by Paul. On this account also he kept on sending for him more frequently and conversing with him. But after 2 years had gone by, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and desiring to ingratiate himself with the Jews, he left Paul behind in shackles.